comets through stars to the whole universe. Vítajte pri Vedátorskom podcaste, v ktorom sa rozprávame o vede a prírode okolo nás. Moje meno je Jozef.
Ja som Samuel.
Tento podcast vychádza v spolupráci so SME. Samko, dneska je špeci epizóda.
Because we should switch to English.
Yes, and this episode will be in English with very special guest that he will introduce himself. Thank you very much for listening. Okay, we are sitting here with our new friend, David. David, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm David Eicher, or Dave Eicher informally, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Astronomy magazine. I went to the magazine after forming a very small amateur magazine when I was a teenager, and I've been there ever since, straight out of school. So I've been at Astronomy magazine for 41 years, and I've been the editor of it for more than 20 years now, 20-some years. So it's been a long adventure there, and I've written a lot of books on history and on science and mostly astronomy, and gotten to know lots of people. When you hang around in a magazine like that, you get to know everyone in the field pretty much. And part of why I'm here is I, about 13, 14 years ago, got to know Garik, Israelian, and Brian May, the co-founders of Starmus. And so we're looking forward to the Starmus Festival right here in Bratislava next spring. We're going to have a fantastic time with it.
So for someone who hasn't heard of Starmus, what is it?
It's very unusual. There's really nothing like it among a science festival. It really came from the word stars and music, Starmus. And as Brian likes to say, you know, who is a PhD astronomer, he went back and finished his degree many years after he got into music.
Little side job in music.
He's got this little day job, you know, playing guitar.
You have to earn your living.
Yeah, in a band called Queen. But you know, he likes to say that. We Will Rock You is sometimes just about asteroids, but sometimes other things, you know. But
it depends about the audience.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. But he you have to use both halves of your brain. You know, science and analytical thinking, and kind of pushing forward with understanding why we're here on planet Earth, what the universe is all about, and also the creative, the artistic side. And so Starmus really brings together lots of pure scientists in all the sciences, not just astronomy, astrophysics, cosmology, planetary science, which is the core, but also lots of art and lots of music, and we'll have a lot of rock and roll at Starmus next spring.
So stars and rock and roll.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Not a bad combination.
It will be the first of its kind in the world?
Seven in the world and first in...
okay,
yes,
great.
It'll be the 7th Starmus. It commenced in 2010, and we've had 6 of them already. Last year we had Starmus in Armenia, and we're looking forward to it here in Bratislava this coming year, and there are other possibilities in the future too, so I think we'll soldier on with it.
Yeah. Do you think there will ever be Starmus on the orbit or on moon in 20, 30 years?
You know, every time we tease Garik, you know, who is a really accomplished astrophysicist and also the co-founder of it and the driving force of Starmus, you know, every time it gets to be bigger and more crazy and more elaborate, and more things are planned, and we've announced a lot already, but we have some secret things that we're kind of working on for May here. And so you think, how can we take it up? And maybe we do have to take it into space eventually here. Yeah.
Sometimes there will be nothing else left to do, and then go to the space. Okay.
One more step up.
Yeah.
Can you name some of the speakers?
Indeed. Yeah, we've announced some, and we'll have many more. And we've got a main stage and sort of primary speakers. And then we'll also have city events with other people speaking around the city and so on. So last time we had more than 50 speakers. And it again will be, I'm sure, at least that many. And it starts with Garik and Brian, and I'll be speaking as well. But we also have some really well-known names in all the sciences. Jane Goodall, the most famous primatologist on Earth, is on our board now along with us, and is very exciting.
I read her book. She's amazing. Yeah,
she's a wonderful, very kind woman too. Martin Rees, the Astronomer Royal of England, who's a very an expert on cosmology and all sorts of things. Sylvia Earle is a very notable oceanographer in that direction. Catherine Hayhoe, of course, as scientists, we're concerned about climate change and so on, and Catherine is a Canadian climate climate scientist who's one of the authorities on global warming and what we're doing with that. Tony Fidel is also on our board, and he's a really entertaining speaker. He's the inventor of the iPod and the co-inventor of the iPhone. He used to be at Apple, of course, and then he went and he founded this company that's a home security company called Nest that maybe you've heard of too. He's a really entertaining guy. Kip Thorne will be here speaking.
I heard that name
world's
before.
Yeah. He's relatively well-known.
Best friend.
We lost Stephen. Stephen Hawking was on our board as well, and we lost him a few years ago now. But Kip, so Kip is the world's leading expert on black holes, among other things, of course. Now
there's no greater authority on black holes than him. Yeah.
Absolutely not. No, he's a great guy, very wonderful.
I'm reading about 5 years his book about black holes. Maybe I will finish it until he will come here.
Black holes and time warps.
Yes,
very classic, famous book, and with great diagrams in it.
Yeah,
too.
but
yeah.
But
very
no
hard.
equation, I think that's the best, basically, gravity book for general audience. Not for students, not for experts, but for general audience. This is the best gravity book, which is, you have to be very devoted to
the book Gravitation.
No, Gravitation or Black Holes and Time Warps.
Yes.
That's the best not textbook, a book on gravity.
Yes.
For me,
yes. But if you get the Gravitation book that Kip and Wheeler and others worked out, that can not only, that's the definitive book on the subject, and is also physically so large, it can be a booster seat or a doorstop too, as well as
a weapon.
Right. Yeah.
And he also wrote the modern physics, which is 1,000 and something pages long. And I use the book very often when I try to show the conservation of momentum when I'm spinning on a chair and I have to hold something very heavy. So it's Gravity and Modern Physics.
So no
by
dumbbells,
Kip Thorne.
but Kip Thorne's book.
Yeah.
So Kip Thorne is coming.
He'll be here, and I don't want to overwhelm, but I'll mention a few more. And this is, frankly, just the start. There are many more beyond.
This is only starting roster.
And we'll have more announcements over the coming weeks as well. But Marcia McNutt will be here, who in the United States is president of the National Academy of Sciences. How can you not? That's got to be a fun person with that name.
He can be serious.
Yes, indeed. Brian Greene, who's very famous for his writings about the hypotheticals of string theory and so on, will be here. Another board member with us is a very wonderful woman, Emmanuelle Charpentier, and she is famous for developing this CRISPR gene splicing technology, which maybe that'll extend all of our lives eventually here, so we may owe her something. One of the most fun Apollo astronauts, he's a dear friend of all of ours, is Charlie Duke, and he'll be there speaking again. A great guy.
Is the guy with the guitar?
No.
Chris Hadfield.
Sorry.
He was there at least one of the Starmuses.
And he will be here again, Chris.
Okay.
But he's a little younger than the Apollo guys.
I didn't hear that you said Apollo guys.
Yeah. But he's famous on the International Space Station.
Yeah, he's great.
And I'm sure he will do it again. He's done this for several Starmuses already, but he does a wonderful rendition of Space Oddity, the David Bowie song, and we love to have him do that. The audience is mesmerized at that. So I'm sure that'll happen again. Another board member of ours is Jill Tarter, the pioneering astronomer who is the director of the SETI Institute and the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. If anyone has read the book Contact or seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster is modeled after Jill, the character there, more or less, He's been hanging around with us a lot this week. Michel Mayor, another one of our Nobel Prize winners, who discovered the first extrasolar planet orbiting a sun-like star, 51 Pegasi b, in 1995, and then won the Nobel Prize and kind of opened this whole era of
exploration of exoplanets.
Exactly, that are mostly near us in the galaxy. And he won the Nobel in 2019 for that. Richard Marco, a computer scientist, is here and will speak. Who is one of the executives of ESET that is sponsoring the get-together here this time. Garik Garrett Reisman, another astronaut. He's another shuttle and space station astronaut. He's a nice guy, wonderful guy. Another climate scientist friend of ours is Chris Rapley, and he has, among other things, been the director of the Science Museum in London. Very wise guy and a fun guy.
Everyone is coming to Brazil.
Yeah, I wanted to say that
the rest of the world will be very empty.
And I'll mention just one more. Lisa Kaltenegger is really good, and she does all sorts of things, life in the universe, exoplanets.
So for how many days IQ in Bratislava will rise?
Well, it reminds me of there's, in the old days in the United States, John Kennedy, who was President Jack Kennedy, they asked him about, he had a dinner for Nobel Prize laureates where many of them were together at the White House. And he said that, he was a pretty clever guy talking to the press, Kennedy. And he said, I'm proud to announce all these names. This is more heavy intelligence that we've had in the White House since Thomas Jefferson dined here alone. He said, that was a good punchline there. Jefferson was a pretty clever guy, too. So it's a huge, and this is really just a start. There will be many, many more speakers than that.
Do you have some kind of website where you update this information or something like that?
We do indeed, and people can go to Starmus, that's STARMUS.com, and the whole program is, as it's announced now, is there. And of course, with our rock and roll, we will have Brian May entertaining us, and usually often Rick Wakeman is there. I don't know about his plans yet, but Peter Gabriel is on our board as well, from famous as a solo artist in Genesis, and Jean-Michel Jarre, who's maybe the most famous electronic musician, is with us here this week as well. He'll be here, and he's done these huge outdoor concerts, in several places, Moscow and Paris and other places, with laser shows and so on. I think the Guinness Book of World Records for a concert is the outdoor Moscow in the late 1990s. 3.5 million people were there in person for that.
It's all Bratislava. So.
Yeah. So we're going to have a lot of space
somewhere. To beat them.
So a lot of entertainment as well as the pure science from the Nobel guys and the astronauts and all that good stuff.
And can people look up tickets and other things related to this event?
They can, and because of the some corporate and some governmental help and sponsorship, and they're places that are enlightened, like here, and people who are interested in spreading the real knowledge of what we know about the world. There's sponsorship there, so the actual cost for people to go to Starmus for this kind of a thing and get, maybe ask questions of these people, or possibly even have a glass of wine near them and talk to them, is much more reasonable than you would expect. Wow. And you can find out the information on that Starmus website.
Perfect. We will put the link down below so you can click it. Thank you for the Starmus. I think I'm excited right now.
Do you want to buy the tickets already?
I'm on my phone right now buying tickets. So this will be amazing. Thank you for organizing it and helping with it and so on. I think for Bratislava it's pretty prestigious thing to host such a heavy names and out of so many fields of science.
Music.
And music. sorry. I just focus on the star, most part. I just want to ask you. You have a great podcast. I listened to few episodes, and you strike me as a guy that I want to say comparison to me that you are something bit by science, but you never became scientist. Was there any reason for this?
Well, I had an unusual upbringing and background. My father was an organic chemist, a professor of chemistry in Ohio at Miami University. Very old, but
not the Miami, the cold one.
This was before the cold one. This was before Miami, Florida got going. This is the not very famous Miami in Ohio. Yeah, but old. George Washington, at the start of our government in America, got this place for a university going. So it goes way back. So anyway, I was hanging around, my dad's chem lab and all this stuff as a little tyke kid, and very interested in science. And I thought maybe I would want to be, a medical doctor, something like that, a surgeon or something. And I made the mistake then when I was a young teenager of going to a star party and saw Saturn in a small reflector, and just the revelation, being able to walk out and see the, orangey yellow rings and globe of Saturn in your back. Yeah, I was thunderstruck, and I have to get into this. And so I started a little publication of my own. It was called Deep Sky magazine about observing galaxies. And very inventive. Huh? And that kind of caught on as larger telescopes were easier to get than to make large mirror telescopes, the so-called Dobsonian revolution and so on, people grinding their own mirrors and so on easily. So that kind of caught on, and I had a physics education background, but bailed on that. I doing all this writing about science, I was having more fun, I thought, than I would be taking data. So I had a physics background for astronomy education, but then bailed and immediately took my little magazine and went to Astronomy magazine, which is the largest publication on the subject in the world.
Wow.
Still
so
today.
Instead of picking a subject, you just basically chose all of them, and just you can switch.
And it has been a great fun, and I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth and toward the end of my career there, at some point here, it's great fun because being able to talk to all of these people in all of the associated fields, get to know them all, work with their material, publish their stuff in Astronomy magazine. It really has been a wonderful sort of way to get engaged with everyone here. It's been great fun. And the readers love it,
Do you still have a telescope at home?
Yeah, I have about 15 telescopes altogether.
Okay.
And,
Weird flex, but okay.
But I don't, I actually observe more, I think. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is in the middle of America. If you kind of head back that way from here and turn, right at Chicago, it's a little north of Chicago in the middle of things there. And it's not a great place for observational.
Because of the light pollution?
Yeah, there's a lot of light pollution. It's near the Great Lakes. There are a lot of particulates in the atmosphere often there. But the light pollution is the key thing, and so it's much better.
We struggle with that in Europe too.
Yeah. And in the States, it's best, in the desert Southwest. And so I'm thinking at some point here, I'll, head toward the desert and have a dark sky again, which will be nice. But yeah.
But it's very interesting because this is one of the subjects when amateurs can actually make a new discovery. Like some exoplanets, I believe, have been discovered by amateur astronomers, just noticing little dips in the luminosity of stars, which is
that's right.
It's ridiculous. If you say it like this, it's ridiculous because the first exoplanet, as you mentioned, was in 1995.
Yes,
and now you can buy something from Amazon and you can try to find exoplanets. That's amazing for me.
That's absolutely right, and it was the first really sort of earth-shattering discovery was Michel's in 1995, a sun-like star. 3 years earlier, there was an exoplanetary system discovered around a pulsar. In 1992. But, now we know of more than 5,500 exoplanets, mostly relatively near us in the Milky Way, around about 4,000 planetary systems. So, what you would expect, understanding how solar systems form, we believe, it's not surprising that, nearly all stars have planets around. That's what you would expect. But for many years, professional astronomers said, we would love to have amateurs cooperate with this professional amateur cooperation, and we love this data and so on, and a kind of a wink, but that it was kind of unreliable, really, what amateurs were doing. Now the instrumentation, the CCD cameras, the other photometers and other things that some amateurs who want to do science, so to speak, have, it's really good enough that amateurs are contributing to papers now, which for a long time they weren't, so that game has really changed. You're right. They can really make discoveries and really take data that will be used.
And this is something that I really like about astronomy, that there are so many open questions. Like in theoretical physics, like there are a lot of, but they are super difficult to attack in any way.
There is nobody like with a little notepad and
a calculator.
And I will do this quantum physics problem for.
Now, I think we should be fair. I've seen the letters. They've come into us and now emails from amateur theoretical physicists who have their own hypotheses about they're really interesting. Okay.
I'm getting those twice.
But they're not, in competition with Albert Einstein. However, okay. They are more studies about the psychology of the author there than the reality. I don't want to sound nasty here, but, wow. Yeah.
It depends about if the weed is there legal or not, right?
Yeah.
The more papers come from California, Colorado.
People with too much time on their hands. Exactly. Yeah.
And do you think that you mentioned the distinction, like we have two parts of brain, so
yes,
science, I'm making quotation marks right now, like science and arts and being creative, but isn't science a lot about being creative, and on the other hand, being a musician, being a lot of like very systematic, hardworking, training how to play violin correctly and things like that? Isn't it actually sometimes the other way around as people imagine it?
Well, I think it absolutely is, and you're precisely right. And in the last couple of days here, Garik and Jean-Michel Jarre and others and I have talked about that very thing. Mm-hmm. There is no clean separation there, and there's a desire to, rather than saying, well, these guys are just, rock and roll guitarists and drummers, and these guys are, theoretical physicists. It's all one big process together, and there is a lot of art in attacking scientific questions in the right way, and science in the right way, is creative too. So it's not like there are two things that are unrelated, and that's kind of what Starmus is about: is bringing those things together and knowing that the same people. This is actually what has driven Brian, to be both a guitarist and a PhD astronomer. His dissertation was on the dust and the zodiacal dust in the solar system, which fortunately for him, he set this aside for 30 plus years, and his family.
One of the longer PhDs.
One of the longer PhDs. In 1970, when he was nearly done with his PhD in the Canary Islands, where Garik is now at Tenerife, he set that aside. His family was horrified. Oh my gosh, you're not going to finish this. Well, he wants to. There's this band, Queen, and within about 5 years' time, it all worked out okay. By the time of
he got lucky.
Night at the Opera and Bohemian Rhapsody. That it was all all the angst was long forgotten by then. But he did go back, and
when they saw the checks, they forgot about the PhD.
He was pretty successful guy in many ways here. But he did go back because the English television presenter Patrick Moore, a very famous BBC television guy who had a program about astronomy for many years, was kind of Brian's hero, and so Patrick sort of really leaned on him to go back and finish his PhD. And this somewhat unusual topic of dust in the solar system, he was able to go back and kind of pick things up because there weren't many people working on it, and there's not a lot of super hot research going on with it, and finished it more than 3 decades later. So yeah, so Brian is kind of our poster guy, if you will, for being very active both with the science and the art of approaching life in that way, and they're not really separate things, exactly as you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And so you spoke about this like merger of being creative, scientific, basically different aspects of the same thing. When you are interviewing different scientists, writing about discoveries, to what extent are you interested in the process of the discovery? Because sometimes we just talk about this is the result. Are you interested also in the way in the journey? Because Kip Thorne was like the lone wolf,
Yeah.
Went away with his notebooks and just wrote calculations and then returned with the results. Some people, I wanted to ask Michel Mayer, but I believe he's a lot of like a discussion guy, just back and forth.
Yeah.
So
Collaborative, yeah.
To what
The
extent
thought process of everybody is different.
So the first question is, to what extent are you interested when you are interviewing someone about the journey of the discovery?
Yeah.
And then how do you work when you are working on the books? But first start with this one, and then we'll get to your creative processes.
Well, it's a very good question, because it is, we think of it as some kind of mechanized force of empirical observation and knowledge and experimentation all kind of coming together in a very, mechanistic way. It is a very human thing, though, science, and it's done by humans, and we all have feelings and approaches that are different. And so that's
very often bad feelings about.
But that's a critical thing, and so it is kind of foremost in my mind. And people do have all sorts of ways that they work. Some are very isolated, and others are very collaborative. And we're kind of have gotten out of that historical period of eureka moments where somebody makes a huge independent discovery. Now we have papers, for the most part, in the journals that are written by a cast of thousands collaborating together. But I think you still do need those, sort of leading light minds. Stephen Hawking, Michel, when it came to exoplanets, and many, many others in all these fields, who kind of move the dial and think of, well, what should these projects be doing and going after? And the whole thing is evolving, in complex ways as the technology and capabilities evolve. And we have, there are new telescopes that we've launched and missions and so on. So unlike something like studying history, which is kind of, a fixed set of facts from the past, that's easy, Now, all of this is very rapidly evolving over time as well. And that, I think, changes the way that people work together on it. So I don't know if that answered the question very intelligently.
If you think so. As a person that is really in the things, and you get very close with those scientists, and you see the discoveries during your work, what do you think the research will bring us in the following decades or years? What are you most excited about from the scientific and technological point of view?
Yeah.
In the near future or greater period of time?
We've just, with Astronomy magazine, this year we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the magazine, and we had in our anniversary issue, and this is really hard, always these things, we've done them in the past, what will the next 50 years of astronomy look like? If we really knew, God help us, it's really tough to say, but I mean, it's just, as you guys know, undoubtedly, this is an amazing, astonishing period in astronomy and allied sciences, but in all the sciences to some degree. With astronomy and cosmology and planetary science, I think we've probably learned more in the last generation in many ways than we knew from the time of Galileo up to a generation ago. The pace of discovery. And I don't want to get into a, half an hour thing here and drive you guys crazy. But in all these kind of big questions, important areas, the origin of the universe, how galaxies evolve, the probabilities for the end of the universe, how life will end on Earth eventually, a billion years or less from now, because of the sun's increasing bolometric magnitude energy output. The commonality of worlds around us in the Milky Way galaxy, the fact that the Milky Way is a barred spiral and we understand its structure, the numbers of galaxies, 100 billion galaxies at least in the universe, the possibilities of stars that could have living things, either simple or complex, around them. In the visible universe would be something like 10,000 billion stars. And not to get into too many diversionary eddies here, but if inflation theory is correct, which most people are leaning toward, the answer is yes, then the universe could be a lot larger than the visible universe we're counting now. So the staggering size of the universe, all these things we really didn't know very well to this degree of detail at all 20 or 30 years ago. So this is a head-spinning sort of velocity of discovery that we're on now, and I don't know where we'll be, 10 or 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 or 10,000 years from now, I think we'll have a very much more complete idea of, what happened here, why we're here as living things that evolved. And we still don't know. Richard Dawkins is also on our board, and he's one of the experts on thinking about, the origin of life on Earth and evolutionary biology. And yet we still don't exactly know how we got from the simplest self-replicating molecules to complex things like cell walls. I'm sorry?
How we got from simple cells to creatures making podcasts and things like that.
Creatures making podcasts. And you could say, another question is there, intelligent life elsewhere in the universe? Yeah. And that presupposes that the only life we know of here is intelligent, which I think you could debate about, too, just getting a joke in there, but not really. But,
we are very hubris in this regard.
But I think we know how the atoms in our bodies. We have something like 7 octillion on average atoms in our body. Those atoms were created in the early universe, the simplest atoms, or in the deaths of low mass and high mass stars. The same atoms recycled into us. So that we know that we're products of the universe, and it's an almost miraculous thing here that we can be sitting here and talking to each other on this podcast, given that. But I think we're going to know a lot more about the whole story, about how we got here, why we got here, and where things are going. But if we knew the details, we'd be geniuses, and I don't. Of what's coming.
Okay. Yeah. But Jozef asked the question in a scientific way, so I'll ask it in a personal way to make you pick one. So imagine there is a time travel from the future, next 100 years ahead.
Yeah.
And he will give you the chance to ask one question about the universe. What are you most interested in?
Boy, that's a good question. I think it would be how common is complex life.
That's a good one.
In the Milky Way and in all these other galaxies. I'd really love to know that. And I think it's, an old hero who I knew as a teenager, and he's been long departed, Carl Sagan, used to say that, another thing we don't think about much is the immensity, the unbelievable huge immensity of the cosmic distance scale. So even if life is abundant, complex life, is civilizations, that are at least as smart as we are, I hope, are out there abundantly throughout our galaxy and others. The distance scale is so huge that we're probably not going to have them physically traveling around star system to star system. I don't want to beat up on sci-fi, love sci-fi, but science fiction ain't science if you talk to astrophysicists, so...
it's like history and fantasy.
Right. And we love it, and it's entertaining.
They use swords, but they didn't have dragons.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, I'm not trying to beat up on entertainment. We need entertainment in our lives, with all the trouble we have on this planet here. But it's probably, common life and sophisticated life, even given the numbers game, of course, but so distant that we'll never really know it.
For me, there are two factors about what you said, the distance, but the second is time for me. So if we just think about how long we study the universe, like scientifically, it's like 100 years, 200, maybe from Galileo. Okay, let's be
a few hundred years
at most.
We'll be getting emails about this estimate, but continue. But people have strong feelings.
Okay, they have strong feeling about anything. I don't care. After 200 episodes, I don't care anymore. But what I wanted to say that we may, as you said, there may be abundance of life and complex life, but different periods of time it can happen, and so we may just miss somebody. Like if there was a perfect civilization like 20 light years away 5,000 years ago, and they destroyed themselves, or they have some kind of apocalyptic happening to them. So we are always have to consider those two factors, like you say, the distance. They are immensely mass distances and the time. So for me, it's like not only the distance, but you have to distance in time. So,
yeah. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I'm not trying to, it's not like we're saying, hey, we know everything. This isn't going to happen. We have a vast amount that we don't know about the universe. We don't know, what dark energy and dark matter are made of definitively yet. That's, more than 3/4 of the, mass energy of the universe. But what we believe, so what science is about is that we believe we do know some things. And repeatedly, it feels better when I'm here close to the scene of things here, never bet against Albert Einstein is one, it's all, science is about repeated observation, testing, and experimentation and things happening in a consistent way over and over and over. And, if, photons can travel at the speed of light because they're massless, things with mass, we can, have a snack here while we're talking and test this. If we eat a muffin and have a drink of coffee, and then try to convert that mass into energy and try to run around the circumference of Earth 6 or 8 times. It takes a lot of energy to move mass over large distances.
A lot of muffins.
Yeah, a lot of muffins. And so, it's not that we know everything. We by no means do we, but we believe that we know fundamental what we think of as scientific laws, and among those are gravitation and relativity. And so those at least are heavy bets against being able to travel such unbelievably huge distances as things with mass in a spacecraft, say. Not to be a bummer, a downer on everything. If we really want to depress the audience, we can talk about, the end of life on Earth. There's another one, but we may have a billion, aside from, asteroids and comets and nearby supernovae, irradiating us. And
we have the eviction notice for 1 billion years.
Well, the sun is increasing its energy output. And aside from climate change, if we don't screw things up ourselves,
will finish the job.
Not making exactly. At best case scenario is 1 billion years or less, the oceans will boil off of Earth, and that's going to kind of ruin our weekend at that point.
But that's 1 billion with B, not M.
That's 1 billion with a B. But and that's 1 billion years is a long time between friends. That's nothing to panic about. But if we think of the earliest life on Earth, at 3.5 or maybe 3.8 billion years, or this is some of the earliest examples of cyanobacteria are not entirely clear, but we're maybe 3/4 or 80% through the story of life on Earth, even though the sun is really only about halfway through its normal lifetime before it becomes a planetary nebula and a white dwarf. So people who are really even astro enthusiasts life on Earth must be about halfway through. It's, so-called sophisticated things like us, have only been around for a much shorter time. But the whole story of life on Earth, the majority of that is done already. Which is kind of astonishing too, which is another thing that we've only known for, a couple of decades, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're observing the discoveries of the universe from the first row, and you notice that the pace of change and the pace of getting new discoveries is basically still increasing. Why do you think this is so? Is it because of technologies, or the community is more efficient, or it's just larger, or combination of three of them?
It's a really nice problem to have, especially trying to cover all this stuff.
To have magazine.
It's a great problem to have. Being we can't do a story on this and that. We only have these 3 super important things. It's an editor's dream, from that point of view. But I think it is a combination of things. The technology is getting better rapidly. The number of big projects, whether they be launched satellites or other more the Webb telescope and others are about to go, the JUICE mission and so on in the solar system is, and then building larger telescopes. The Atacama Desert in Chile is kind of the poster child for the best place to be with a large telescope on Earth now. High altitude and very dry, and as Bart Bach, a great astronomer, used to say, all the good stuff's in the southern hemisphere. Which was a little exaggeration, but not that much. So there's an explosion, and just more and more astronomers, I think, who are trained, who are working on stuff together now. I think it's a combination of all of those things. And of course, science is a slow, self-correcting process. It builds on the knowledge that preceded it. So the wave of knowledge, even though some fundamental things, we mentioned dark energy and dark matter for one thing. Dark matter goes back to Fritz Zwicky in the 1930s, but we still don't know what is responsible, really. But the kind of wave of building of the knowledge has really accelerated in the last 30 years or so. So I think it's a combination of all of those things.
Do you think this acceleration will continue, or it will halt at some point?
I think it probably maybe can't continue at this rapid pace because, at some point,
it's too much.
We'd know everything. Astronomers would all be out of work, and I don't think that's going to happen. We still have a lot to learn. There's a brief sidestep. There's a book that's a generation old or so now called Cosmic Discovery that an astronomer named Bob Jastrow wrote. And he sort of looked at the phenomena in the universe and what we really know about and hypothetically what we don't yet know about. And, this was in the 1970s, I think. He estimated that we probably know maybe about 20% of the kinds of phenomena in the universe. I don't think I disagree. There's a lot to learn still, but the knowledge base is building at such a rapid pace compared to, say, the whole time of astrophysics. Astrophysics sort of got going, spectroscopy, astronomically, and other physical techniques of analyzing data about the time of the American Civil War in the 1860s. And we probably have learned, a great deal more about many details in the last generation compared to that whole time since the birth of astrophysics, I would think. So I think at some point it has to kind of slow down because the acceleration has been so rapid. It's incredible in the last 20, 30, 40 years. And at some point there aren't going to be as many new astronomers, taking on all this stuff. But it's a very exciting time. And what's exciting to me, not to repeat myself, but the fact that we're either answering or getting closer to some of these answers to these big questions. How did the universe begin? We know the Big Bang happened now. How will it end? Likely, we don't know absolutely, but it's likely it will be, a sort of a, kind of a weak, undramatic ending of the movie. There won't be any cosmic. It'll be an expansion in a colder, darker universe in which red dwarfs.
It started with a bang, but it won't end with one.
It'll end with a whimper, and probably we don't know exactly, but things are leaning very much toward a colder, dark universe with a few M dwarfs still burning, and that's it. That's kind of a sad and inglorious way to go out. And then we talked about the length of habitability of Earth we know about well now, and all those things and how galaxies evolve. We really were talking about and arguing about in the 1950s and 60s still, and that's pretty well known now. I wrote a book called Galaxies a couple of years ago that kind of summarizes all that stuff.
So when I open your Wikipedia page, there are plenty of books, edited, written by yourself, very long list. But we spoke of the changes we see in the astrophysics community, but in general audience, we see the trend of shortened attention span, just living on social media and things like that. So from your point of view, what is the role of books, mostly scientific, in this era of shortened attention span? That's
a really good question. And, as far as producing a lot of books, hey, everyone needs a hobby, right? So, that's kind of, taken up some of my time. But it's a little worrisome. The death of the book has been forecast because of technology and, Tony inventing iPads and stuff like that, for a generation now. That hasn't really happened. I don't think there are a lot of young people who are reading lots and lots of books now. Everything gets read through here, and because we're not on camera, I'll say I'm looking at my phone now. So it's a little bit worrisome that we're in a kind of a shorter attention span. Everything that exists that's possibly worth knowing is here on the phone, which is absolutely long way from reality. If you spend, 3 or 4 months wandering through the Library of Congress in Washington, you can see that a lot of important stuff that exists in any field like astronomy or others is not online. So if you really want to know what you're doing and as an expert, you have to go to books as well as online resources and so on. So it's a little worrisome, and it relates to another thing that is a bit of a concern. How do we know what we believe, to be true? And this, goes way back to ancient history, and it's the backbone of science, and it, not to introduce controversy into your guys' show here, but, it bleeds into politics and so on as well, which is a mess, in the United States and some other places. But, in the old, there's kind of a spectrum of how we believe things. There's intuition here on one end, and if we went back in time with time traveling 1,000 years, a lot of people might say, well, I dreamed this, so I think it's a premonition of what's going to happen, and I have confidence in that, And then the slightly more reliable than that is authoritarianism. Well, a politician or a doctor or a teacher or my friends or my parents told me something, it must be right, Well, maybe, but not necessarily. Then, their rational method, stochastic mathematics and so on, is more reliable, but can't necessarily answer every question. Empiricism, is we think as scientists is the most reliable way to determine what is reality. We don't know how. We think the universe, began because a giant, dragon ordered it so, who stepped out off of a mountain, Empiricism is, observation and experiments and results in a controlled, repeatable way with a scientific method and approach. That we think is the best way to get to the truth for those who really care about the truth. And it worries me as books wane a bit and as, I don't want to sound like an old curmudgeon here, but as a lot of younger people, well, I heard this from, or I saw it online, and there's
I saw YouTube video or something like that.
I did my research.
I did my research one Friday.
and not to sound like a real fundamentalist for science, but research actually means doing work that nobody's done before, That's research isn't just reading something on a phone,
That somebody wrote and you just repeat it.
That's reading, not research. So anyway,
that's a good point.
Independently, it's hard. It takes effort to independently think through things and check sources and who is more reliable, and why should I believe that pumping more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is not a good thing for long-term habitability on Earth. See Venus and other things. But there are ways that people can really understand the realities of things. But it takes work and thinking and effort. And most people are running around on the 2D surface of Earth about their daily lives, and they don't have that focus and energy, and they don't care what they want to see the world the way they see it, or the way that their group sees it there. And we can go back, 100,000 years. And, at that point, long ago, what your tribe believed could save your life. If you were with them hunting and so on, you had to be cooperative and believe exactly what they believed. Now, a lot of people believe, well, my parents thought that or something, and I'm just going to think it too, and so it's a little sad, the kind of leaning away from definitive books or understanding the best books or sources to read, and just kind of washing through a lot of stuff, a lot of which is junk and propaganda online, and not really going through the independent thinking process of analytically thinking about things. That worries me a lot.
I think we are the same with someone.
But unfortunately, we are running out of time.
Yes.
But I think we could keep going like this for hours. So maybe before Starmus, you should arrive one day early. You will be jet-lagged. We'll order pizza and we'll do an all-nighter of chatting.
Yeah, we can.
You're on. I will tell Garik. That sounds like it would be
sure.
Brian.
Bring
everybody. Bring Kit Thorne. Everybody.
We'll bring Brian. Yeah.
We'll get use of all those jet-lag scientists.
Yeah. No, that's the best way to be.
But I think we could just keep discussing about basically. We have scratched the surface of many topics. And
thank you very much for coming here and talking with us. It was amazing for me. I love doing guest shows. This was our first in English. I hope it was comprehensive for everyone and from our part, not from yours, because you are professional in this. And we hope to see you before the Starmus and during the Starmus.
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for having me here. It's been really fun. And you guys are really smart and on top of everything. So it was really enjoyable to talk about stuff with you.
You haven't read the comments. No, I am joking. So thank you, our audience, for listening to us. You can find us on all podcast applications and see you later. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.